Evening, everyone, and a warm welcome on a cold night. And welcome to our 9th annual fundraiser for Grassroots North Shore. I'm Keith Schmitz, founder and member of the steering committee for Grassroots North Shore. And it's my pleasure to welcome you all. In the words of Sergeant Pepper, it's wonderful to be here, and it's certainly a thrill. And we have some things to thrill you with tonight, which includes our great lineup of speakers that we'll be hearing from later on. Special thanks go out to the events committee for putting this together, especially under the leadership of our energetic and persistent leader, Shirley Horowitz. So the topic we're going to talk about tonight is extremely important to the state of Wisconsin. It is, as we refer to it, a supreme opportunity. If you're tired of the gerrymandering, of the voter suppression, the threats to abortion access, and just general overall lack of progress in the state of Wisconsin, this election is for you. We have a Supreme Court seat that's up for grabs, and we have two really good candidates who are going to be vying for it, who will be speaking to you tonight. That includes the two are Judge Everett Mitchell from Dane County, and Judge Janet Protsayerwitz from Milwaukee County. Like I said, this election has a lot at stake, and one of the things that is extremely important is that this will melt down to two candidates and not necessarily one of these. So this is a low turnout election. It's going to be important that you all save time, not just to vote, but to volunteer. Now, one of the things that I wanted to mention is that this video will be available afterwards, and please get it out to your friends and put it up on Facebook. There's going to be some really interesting topics that we're going to cover. So for those of you who are living in the 8th district, we have another opportunity coming up. Longtime state Senator Alberta Darling has finally retired, and we have an excellent candidate who stepped up to run for that office by the name of Jody Habush Sinekin. She has built quite a career as an attorney. She's the progressive that we want and need, and you'll be hearing from her later. In fact, just want to mention that we will be hearing again from her and the winner for the Supreme Court race, and Deb Andraka, live on March 12th. It's been a long time since we've seen each other, since fall. So it'll be great to get back together in person. So with us tonight is our special guest tonight is Nick Stephanopoulos from Harvard Law. He, among his areas of interest, includes election law and constitutional law. He has been associated with Wisconsin since 2014, when he joined in on the suit to overturn gerrymandering in the state. And he is certainly involved on an ongoing basis with what we're trying to do in order to change things electorally in Wisconsin. He has been on, he's published in a number of professional journals. He's been on the pages of the major newspapers. He's been on TV and radio, and I'm sure there's been a few podcasts in there. So let's take the next 10 minutes to hear from Nick. Thank you, Nick.
Great. Thanks so much, Keith. It's really wonderful to be here. And let me just also thank Grassroots North Shore and Shirley in particular for organizing this event. And we also thank in advance Judge Protasewicz and Judge Mitchell for speaking tonight. So you might be wondering why an election law professor based in Boston would have an interest in the Wisconsin Supreme Court. Keith alluded to my connection to Wisconsin, but I thought I would start with just a few words about why I'm so focused on Wisconsin law and politics, despite living more than 1,000 miles away. So as Keith mentioned, from 2014 to 2019, I was heavily involved in litigating Whitford v. Gill, which was the partisan gerrymandering challenge to Wisconsin state House map in federal court. I was a lawyer in the case, and the case also relied on a quantitative measure of partisan gerrymandering called the efficiency gap that I introduced in some academic articles of mine a few years back. So the Whitford litigation was the first time ever that a federal court held that a district map was unconstitutional on partisan gerrymandering grounds. The trial court in Whitford also adopted a legal standard for partisan gerrymandering that continues to be used in state courts around the country. Number one, was a map designed with partisan intent? Number two, is the partisan bias of a map large and durable? And number three, is there any neutral justification for this bias? The Whitford case went all the way up to the US Supreme Court, which in 2018 punted on the central issue in the case, sent us back to the trial court to prove that our plaintiffs had standing, and also dropped a bunch of really promising hints that we would win if and when we returned to the US Supreme Court. But before we could return to the court, unfortunately, Justice Kennedy retired and was replaced by Justice Kavanaugh. And so a potential 5-4 majority in our favor and against gerrymandering instead became a 5-4 majority that ultimately ruled in a case out of North Carolina that I also worked on, that federal courts simply won't and can't hear partisan gerrymandering claims. So thanks to that extremely intense and protracted experience of the Whitford litigation, I've been very interested in Wisconsin law and politics for years, especially with respect to election law issues. And so that's why I was so pleased to have the chance to participate in tonight's event. So let me turn now from the federal courts to the Wisconsin Supreme Court and what I think are its highly disturbing rulings in recent years. I'll talk about three big election law cases that the court has decided. Johnson v. Wisconsin Election Commission involving redistricting, Teagan v. Wisconsin Election Commission involving drop boxes for absentee ballots, and Milwaukee NAACP v. Walker back in 2014, which involved a photo ID requirement for voting. And I'm focusing on election law cases because they're my academic specialty, and because it would take me far too long to cover all of the Wisconsin Supreme Court's recent bad rulings. And also because the election law rulings really highlight what's at stake in this election. So if the composition of the Wisconsin Supreme Court could be changed, the court could strike down partisan gerrymanders that have given Republicans an undeserved stranglehold on the state legislature. And the court could strike down the series of voting restrictions the Republicans have passed to try to suppress Democratic and minority turnout. And so this one election could result in a Wisconsin where it's easy, not hard, for eligible voters to cast ballots, and where once they're cast, the ballots give rise to representation that fairly accurately reflects the will of the people in the state. Before getting into the details of the cases, let me also flag that there is nothing inevitable, nothing legally mandated about the Wisconsin Supreme Court's rulings in these cases. The court divided three in Johnson and Teagan and Milwaukee NAACP. And in very similar cases in other states, other state Supreme Courts struck down partisan gerrymanders and photo ID requirements for voting, and upheld drop boxes for absentee ballots. So the anti-democratic rulings of this court are fundamentally the product of ideology, but not of law. And if those rulings were reversed in the years to come, that wouldn't be legally problematic in the slightest, but it would vindicate democratic, small d democratic values in Wisconsin. Okay, let me start with Johnson, which is the recent redistricting litigation in Wisconsin. The backdrop here is that Wisconsin had maybe the country's most extreme and durable gerrymanders at the state legislative level in the 2010s. These were gerrymanders that regularly led to Republicans winning supermajorities in the state legislature after receiving a minority of the statewide vote. So after the 2020 census, the Republican legislature couldn't just enact new gerrymanders like last time because the governor was now a Democrat and so would veto any new gerrymanders. So what happened instead is that the legislature drew new, extremely biased maps. Of course, Governor Evers rejected those maps. And then the legislature went running to the Wisconsin Supreme Court, arguing that the court should adopt the legislature's maps. Now, let me note that it's not unusual at all for state courts to draw districts when the state legislature and the governor are controlled by different parties and can't agree on new maps. What was extraordinary about the Wisconsin Supreme Court's initial ruling in Johnson is that the court embraced a so-called least change criterion. So the court said it would adopt new maps that deviated to the smallest possible degree from the maps used in the 2010s, and that also complied with all other legal requirements. And so this was really legally preposterous because the least change criterion is nowhere to be found in the Wisconsin Constitution. It's nowhere to be found in Wisconsin precedent or in Wisconsin statutes. And given Wisconsin's history over the last decade, the least change requirement, of course, meant that the extreme, ruthless gerrymanders of the 2010s would be extended by another decade. Now, there were various twists and turns in this litigation after the initial ruling. The Wisconsin Supreme Court said that it would adopt remedial maps proposed by Governor Evers, which seems surprising and good, except when you realize that those maps still had to comply with the least change requirement. And so they were still solid Republican gerrymanders, just not quite as solid as the legislature's own maps. After the court selected Governor Evers' maps, the legislature went running to the US Supreme Court, which ruled that a handful of state house districts in Milwaukee in the governor's map might be racially gerrymandered. Then, rather than reopen the remedial process to solicit maps that definitely were not racially gerrymandered, the Wisconsin Supreme Court instead adopted the legislature's original maps. And so somehow at the end of all this litigation, the outcome was exactly the same as in 2011. The Republican legislature got to impose its hugely biased maps, which are going to ensure that the Republican stranglehold on the state legislature continues for as long as those maps are in place. And let me just flag here how different the outcome could have been and would have been if the Wisconsin Supreme Court had only followed the model of other states where the state legislature and the governor couldn't agree on new maps. There were also impasses of this kind in major swing states like Minnesota, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. But in each of those states, the state Supreme Court did not embrace a least change requirement. And the state Supreme Court did not just accept the legislature's maps. And instead, the state Supreme Court in each of those states did design a fair and neutral plan, sometimes with the help of an outside expert. And so now Minnesota, Pennsylvania, and Virginia all have state legislative and congressional maps that do accurately convert the will of the people in those states into legislative representation. And the reason is just that those states, each of them, had a better state Supreme Court, more committed to democratic values than the Wisconsin Supreme Court. And what's really critical is that this can also be Wisconsin's future shortly, if only the composition of the Wisconsin Supreme Court changes this year. Let me turn next to the Teigen case involving the legality of drop boxes for absentee ballots. So of course, drop boxes were widely used in the 2020 election in Wisconsin and many other states. In all these places, instead of mailing back absentee ballots, people just dropped off their absentee ballots in drop boxes prior to Election Day. This mode of voting avoided reliance on the mail system with its potential delays. It also avoided the need to vote in person, where there could be long lines or health risks due to the pandemic. And there's also no evidence whatsoever of substantial fraud occurring through the use of drop boxes. Nevertheless, in Teigen, the Wisconsin Supreme Court held that drop boxes are somehow illegal under state law. The court's reasoning was that a state statute says that absentee ballots can be either mailed back or, quote, delivered in person to the municipal clerk. So according to the court, when absentee ballots are placed in drop boxes, somehow that means they're not delivered in person to the municipal clerk. Now, the dissenting opinion in Teigen by Justice Bradley completely dismantled this argument. So when a voter places an absentee ballot in a drop box, the voter obviously does deliver the ballot in person to the drop box. And the voter also delivers the ballot to the municipal clerk, just as the statute says, because it's the municipal clerk who sets up the drop box. It's the municipal clerk who monitors and maintains the drop box. And it's the municipal clerk who then retrieves the ballots from the drop box and processes them and ultimately counts them. But it's worth noting that the Wisconsin Supreme Court's opinion in Teigen wasn't just bad as a matter of statutory interpretation. It also completely failed to use what's known as the democracy canon in election law circles. This is a rule of thumb in statutory interpretation that says that when laws about voting are ambiguous, they should be construed to make voting easier, not harder. You know, put the thumb on the scale in favor of democracy, not against democracy, when construing confusing or old or ambiguous electoral statutes. So the democracy canon is used all the time around the country, but evidently it's not applicable in Wisconsin, or at least not applicable before this current Supreme Court. And Teigen also makes Wisconsin an outlier in another regrettable way. So after the 2020 election, Republicans led by the Trump campaign attacked drop boxes and other ways in which absentee voting was facilitated in numerous states around the country. These lawsuits failed everywhere, even in front of Republican appointed judges, except in Wisconsin. So Teigen is the only case I'm aware of post 2020 in any state where a court accepted the Trump campaign's narrative about rampant fraud and then ruled that using drop boxes is somehow illegal. So let me turn now to the last case I'll talk about. This is the Milwaukee NAACP case back in 2014, which upheld a photo ID requirement for voting that Republicans enacted in 2011 as soon as they obtained unified control of the Wisconsin state government after the 2010 election. So this was one of the strictest photo ID requirements in the country. It was a substantially stricter law than the Indiana photo ID law that the US Supreme Court upheld in a 2008 case. The Wisconsin Supreme Court nevertheless held that the law did not materially burden voting and that it served the state's legitimate interest in preventing fraud. And the court came to those conclusions despite evidence that up to 20% of eligible Wisconsin voters lack up-to-date, valid driver's licenses. And despite the complete absence of any evidence that Wisconsin has any problem in the modern era with in-person impersonation voter fraud, which is the only kind of voter fraud that a photo ID requirement can actually prevent. And once again, it didn't have to be this way. So in recent years, other state courts in Arkansas, Missouri, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and other places all have struck down photo ID requirements for voting. So those courts have reasoned that photo ID requirements severely burden voting for the substantial number of eligible voters who lack valid photo IDs. And those courts have also concluded that photo ID requirements don't advance any legitimate state interest because the kind of fraud that they try to prevent essentially doesn't exist in modern day America. It may have existed a century ago, but there simply is no epidemic, not even a problem of voter impersonation today. And so once more, the Wisconsin Supreme Court could follow those other courts' lead in years to come, if only the Wisconsin Supreme Court had different, better members more committed to democratic values. So I hope I've now said enough to show you how awful the Wisconsin Supreme Court's record has been on this fundamental issue of democracy, and how much better things could be if the court tried to promote rather than to undermine democratic values through its rulings. Let me now just say a few words about our featured speakers tonight, Judge Janet Protasiewicz and Judge Everett Mitchell. Judge Protasiewicz, a veteran prosecutor and advocate for victims of crime, currently serves as a Milwaukee County Circuit Court judge. She has served on the boards of the Association of Marquette University Women and the Marquette University Law School Alumni Association. She belongs to the Association of Women Lawyers, Tempo, Professional Dimensions, Surgeons Inns of Court, Foley Inns of Court, and Fairchild Inns of Court. Judge Everett Mitchell, the presiding judge for Dane County's Juvenile Division, has served on Dane County's Circuit Court since 2016 and has been elected to this seat twice. He also serves as an adjunct professor at the University of Wisconsin Law School in Madison and as senior pastor at Christ the Solid Rock Baptist Church in Madison. He has worked with the Madison Metropolitan School District to create an Office of Youth Engagement as a bridge to educational programming for youth involved in the criminal justice system. We'll hear first from Judge Protasiewicz and then immediately afterwards from Judge Mitchell. So welcome, Judge Protasiewicz. I'll turn the floor over to you now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. And I am delighted to be here. That was a really illuminating history of some of the issues that have been presented and the problems that we have had in really maintaining a fair democracy. My name is Judge Janet Protasiewicz. I am currently a judge in Milwaukee County, as you know. And the reason I decided to run for the Wisconsin Supreme Court is really very, very simple. I could not sit back and let radical right-wing extremists hijack our Supreme Court. And that is exactly what will happen if one of the two conservative candidates secures this election in April. Everything we care about, and I mean everything, will be determined by who wins this seat on April 4th. We just heard a wonderful talk from Nick about our democracy, so to speak, in regard to gerrymandering, people's ability to vote, the drop boxes, the photo IDs. We've heard all about that. And that is such a critical issue. We had a forum in Madison 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I came out hitting hard. I said that the maps are rigged. The fact that I said the maps are rigged has led to a complaint being filed against me by the Republican Party of the state of Wisconsin. And I stand by that comment that the maps are rigged. I don't think that you can sell to any rational person who knows the facts that our maps are fair and they represent the people in the state of Wisconsin and that they're democratic. You can't sell that to anybody. I stand by the fact that our maps are rigged and they absolutely don't represent the people in this state. You know, the state of Wisconsin is a battleground state. We have a Democratic governor who in 2018 won by 1.1%. This time he won by, I think, over 3%. We have the fact that Ron Johnson was able to win re-election as a Republican. We have the fact that Josh Call won by a small amount. And we have the fact that our state treasurer candidate, the Democratic state treasurer candidate, lost. And what that tells us all is that these races are really all in play. All of them are in play. The elections are very, very close. And then you look at those maps and you look at what has happened and the fact that approximately 65% of the state assembly and the state Senate are red, and you look at that and you know that they don't reflect the people in this state. You look at the fact that we have 8 congressional districts in Wisconsin and 2 are blue and 6 are red. And you know that there are major, major problems with our maps, major problems. You know, other issues that we all need to think about, that we are all concerned about, a woman's right to choose, women's reproductive rights. I have to be very careful about threading a needle when I talk about that particular issue. I certainly cannot tell you how I will vote on any issue. I will obviously follow the law, uphold the Constitution, but my value is that that is a woman's right to choose. Reproductive rights are critical privacy rights that females have. And, you know, you look at that in context of what is happening in our state and the 1849 ban on abortion. And I can guarantee to you, if one of the conservative candidates wins that 1849 law, banning abortion in any instance is going to stand, just as our maps are going to stand. Lots of other issues that I know people are concerned about, you know, clean water and the environment. And of course, my Wisconsin values support clean water and the environment. People are concerned about marriage equality. People are concerned about safety and community safety. So there are so many issues that are going to be coming before us and become before the Supreme Court that make this race extraordinarily critical. And I would say that it is highly likely, more likely than not, that the results of the 2024 presidential election will come before our Supreme Court chamber, just as the results of the 2020 election came before our Supreme Court chamber. So everything we care about, everything is in play with who wins this election. So let's talk about that against the backdrop of the numbers on our state Supreme Court. So you already know, and I call this kind of a double punch, you already know how high the stakes are and what we think about the potential issues coming before the court. And then let's look at the makeup of our Wisconsin Supreme Court. As a little bit of a way of background, there are 7 seats on our Wisconsin Supreme Court. Right now, 4 of those seats are held by far right-wing extremists. 3 of those seats are held by people who actually follow the law and uphold the Constitution. And we have a unique opportunity, an opportunity that we have not had in years and years and years, to flip our Supreme Court to 4-3. And when I say 4-3, I mean, a majority of justices who are going to follow the law and uphold the Constitution. And those justices that I'm talking about are Jill Karofsky, Ann Walsh Bradley, Rebecca Dallett. We have an incredible opportunity to have a justice who will join with those three bold, brave justices in moving our state forward. So the opportunity could not be more golden. The stakes could not be any higher than they currently are. A little bit about me. I was born and raised on the south side of Milwaukee to two very, very hardworking parents. My parents were educators, and they instilled in me a number of values. You work hard, you give back to your community, and you get a good education. And that is just what I did. I worked hard. I worked as a waitress when I was going through undergrad. I worked my way through undergrad, took the U bus to UW Milwaukee and majored in history. And then I went to Marquette University for law school. That was a wonderful experience for me. I blossomed there at Marquette Law School, met wonderful people, and really put down a lot of roots there. I actually became the president of their law school alumni association a few years ago and have had a very, very strong presence there. After I graduated from law school, the question became, what did I want to do? I did have an opportunity working while I was in law school at what was then M&I Trust Company, dealing with generation skipping income tax. And I decided that those kind of issues were not for me. I wanted to continue to do what I was born and raised to do, and that was give back to our community. And I was very, very honored to be appointed an assistant district attorney in Milwaukee County. As an assistant district attorney in Milwaukee County, I had an incredible opportunity to protect victims, protect families, at the same time upholding people's constitutional rights, and work really hard to keep our communities safe. As I, and many of you know, because I met many of you, my Grassroots North Shore friends, when I decided to run for judge in 2013. And I ran against an appointment of Governor Scott Walker, and that was Rebecca Bradley. And I certainly wasn't aware, and I think many others were not aware of the trajectory that had been planned for her from the Circuit Court to the Court of Appeals to currently being on our Supreme Court. And, I think that gave me a very unique look into campaigning. I tell people that that was not a pleasant experience when I went through that in 2013. Probably, and I would say the only circuit court race that I'm aware of, the only circuit court race that I'm aware of where outside money came in, where the Club for Growth was involved, where my character was assassinated on talk radio and on television. And I persevered. And after that race, ran successfully and unopposed 2 more times. I tell you that only because I think it's important that you all understand that I made a lot of ties during that time. I met a lot of friends. I had a lot of deep support of labor when I was running again against now Justice Bradley. And I'm uniquely prepared to take on what I anticipate I will be taking on as of February 21st. How are we going to win this thing? It is critical that we win this seat. I have well over 1,000 endorsements across this state. I have out fundraised all 3 of my opponents combined. I have the public endorsement of Justice Rebecca Bradley, of Judge Lisa Neubauer, and people all across our state. And I tell everybody, this is not a Milwaukee County, Dane County race. This is a race that encompasses everybody in the entire state. Yesterday, I was in Richland Center, and I was in Viroqua, and I was in Prairie du Chien talking to people. Last week, I was in La Crosse, and Barneveld, and Mineral Point, and Spring Green, and Mazel-Maney talking to people. I am traveling this entire state. We're on TV. We are on radio, and we are poised to be able to win this seat. I have incredible, incredible union support. We just announced the endorsement of AFSCME. We have the bricklayers, the carpenters, and if you take a look at janetforjustice.com, you will see, all of our endorsements, and we are working so very hard to procure those endorsements. And I am so honored to be here. I remember when I first came to Grassroots North Shore in 2012 and 2013, and I was on a budget that was tight, to put it mildly. I joined and became a member of Grassroots North Shore. I met Keith there. I met so many other wonderful people and have maintained those ties. And I am absolutely delighted to be here with all of you today. And I would love to earn your support in this race. So thank you so very much. And I will wrap up so that Judge Mitchell will have the opportunity to address all of you.
Well, thank you all so much, Grassroots North Shore, for this opportunity to present to you. I was so glad to meet Shirley when we had the picnic this past summer. So I got a chance to meet a lot of Grassroots family and so many wonderful people who I got a chance to engage in to talk about this vision for our Wisconsin Supreme Court and why it's so important for us to not only make sure we win, but also we have the best opportunities to bring together a diverse coalition to be able to get us in a position where what has been presented to us today can be transformed and changed. I want to start with, this idea from Dr. King back in 1957. He gave a speech where he said, "Give us the ballot." And he said this, and I thought was so important as I was listening to this discussion about voting. He said, "So long as I do not firmly and irrevocably possess the right to vote, I do not possess myself." And when we think about why these elections are so crucial, it really gives us an opportunity to talk about the history of voting and the ways in which voting has been used to both entrench minority power, but also to make sure that minorities and those who've been disenfranchised don't get a chance to be able to speak their voice and use their voice. As a presentation by, Mr. Stephanopoulos talked about, was the idea that this whole process started back in, around 2013, 2014, with this limitation of the voting access. And when they were able to secure that success, then they were able to move and position themselves to be able to successfully ensure that the right to vote and access to voting was impacted such that both the gerrymandering maps, and I totally agree with the decisions related to, ballot drop boxes and the invalidation or adopting a least change approach, were two ways in which the Supreme Court demonstrated a level of conservative judicial activism, which made this seat even more vital for us to make sure we move away from the idea of conservatives making decisions related to voting. I still am, uniquely concerned about this new case in North Carolina. It's a Moore case where they're testing out this notion of independent state legislature theory, which will also put more power in those kinds of state legislatures to determine whether or not voting was appropriate or whatever laws related to voting, and then move the check and balance of the Supreme Court to deal with the elections in those states away from that ability to do so. So as I am Dane County Circuit Court judge, as you can see, those things are very passionate to me. So when people ask me, like, why are you running for the Supreme Court? It is because I believe our state deserves a justice that reflects the diversity and ideas of our entire state. That I run on this notion that justice is not just what you say, justice is also what you do. We have to begin to do something for our communities in order to make a transition so that people can feel fairness and justice. As I've traveled this entire state from Barron County, Viroqua County, St. Croix, all the way up to, hitting La Crosse, Green Bay, down to Racine, Kenosha, Milwaukee, all the way to the west parts of our state, over and over again, I continually am reminded that people are feeling for the first time how often their voices are now being stripped from them, and then they're not being able to not only have the right to vote, but also their voice is stripped from them. And I've decided, we have to do something about this. And so I'm a Dane County Circuit Court judge. As he said, I'm the presiding judge of our juvenile division. I was the first person of color to lead that division. And because I lead that division, I've been able to implement trauma-informed practices so that we can be able to change the narrative of so many young people so they can actually have the right to vote once they leave our system. And that is very important to me. I run our high-risk drug court program here in Dane County. I teach 2 courses at the law school on race, racism, and the law. And I teach one on juvenile justice administration. I'm a senior pastor of Christ the Solid Rock Church. I'm the only open and affirming Black congregation in Dane County and only 2 in the entire state. And I was the first Black Baptist pastor to marry a same-sex couple to ensure that marriage equality was not just something that was a right that the Supreme Court gave, but so that my congregation, my young people, could know the power of that work. So when I tell you that justice is what you do, these are just a couple examples of things that I've been concerned about and done. Even before I became a judge, I worked and built a restorative justice program to support young men and women coming out of prison. I started with 6 months, working with them 6 months ahead of time, bringing them back into the community. We also worked hard and we reduced the recidivism rate from 70% down to 15% in 2 years. We were able to, I built and worked to support CCAP changes so that men and women who have charges that are dismissed or found not guilty of could be removed from CCAP. That was one moment of bipartisan support of working with Robin Voss to do that. And then I was able to make sure that the young people up under our leadership get a fair share. And so we've been able to work with our community partners, law enforcement partners, faith communities to be able to extract a different way of working with our young people. So we've been able to challenge public safety. And so we've been able to have a 47% reduction in juvenile car theft referrals. 85% of our young people don't come back. We went down from 4 judges to 3 in our juvenile division because we no longer have the cases to justify them being in person. And so these kinds of actions are important because it shows that what judges can do to be able to make sure that their communities are kept safe and that we're making sure. I don't brag about how many people I've locked up. I brag about how many futures I saved. And that works 2 ways. When there's nobody committing crimes, you're saving a young person so they can be able to have a future. They can vote, they can go to college, they can get a trade, they can work, they can be free. But also more importantly, there are no more victims. I can tell you as a former prosecutor, one of the things that always frustrated me was that I felt like I was always behind the situation. So as a judge, I've chosen to be proactive and make sure that not only what I do on the bench, but also what I do off the bench is so powerful as well. And so just let me give you a quick biography and then I'll be out. I grew up the son of a single mother from Fort Worth, Texas. And my mom married a guy who was abusive to her and to my sisters and I. And she stayed in that relationship a long time. And so by the time I was 18 years old, I was a kid who was functionally illiterate because I lived in all that trauma and pain. And I had taken a job bagging groceries. And I was bagging groceries when I got a phone call from a small school in East Texas called Jarvis Christian College. And I got that call while I was bagging groceries. And the lady said, "Hey, we heard you're a good student. Why don't you come try college? We think you'll be good." So that's what I did. I said to her, "Well, I don't know. Nobody in my family been to college." She said, "Well, check this out. You can come to college. If it don't work out, you can always go back to bagging groceries." So I said, "All right." So I went down to college, threw all my stuff in the trunk, went down there and failed everything because it became apparent that I couldn't read. And so what I had was, as I was putting on my backpack, getting ready to head out, 2 teachers, Ms. Margaret Bell and Ms. Daisy Wilson, pulled me to the side and said, "Everett, you're a diamond in the rough, and we don't want to see you give up on your dream of a college education." And so I said to her, "Well, I'm all right, sure, I'm here." And so they taught me how to read. They taught me how to study. They taught me how to organize notes. They taught me the discipline of going to the library every night from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. And that's what I did. And in that one semester, I went from making a 1.5 to a 4.0. And then I was able to continue to make 4.0s because I could read now. I could read for the first time. And so I went from making a 4.0 that allowed for me to transfer to Morehouse College, where I received degrees in mathematics and religion. And then I was able to go to Princeton and get 2 master's degrees, one in Masters of Theology and one in Master's of Divinity, and then eventually make my way to the University of Wisconsin-Madison Law School and earn my Juris Doctorate while being a single father, while working a full-time job, getting on law review, and then still graduate in 3 years. So the passion that I bring to the Supreme Court race is about bringing a diverse coalition of people together. Just yesterday in Milwaukee and Kenosha, I hit 6 events. I started with some veterans in Waukesha doing breakfast with the Rotary. And then I went down to the Vets Memorial and spent some time with our vets. Then I went down to Racine at the Black Arts Collectible. And then I ended my time in Milwaukee talking to a whole bunch of young men and women who often feel like the system doesn't represent them. In order to win this race, not only will we have to get those who are passionate about and paying attention to this, but we also have the ability to inspire people to get to the polls because they understand that this race is significant. Because as I travel around the state, this race is two races, really. It's a race for those who understand about voting maps and reproductive choice and standing firm on the fact that people need to have access to reproductive choice in their lives. And as a cisgender male ally, I've stood and continue to stand with the reproductive choice for those who need to know that we will use our male privilege to check anybody else. And I was endorsed by Planned Parenthood in my last election cycle here in Dane County. But there's another race that's focusing on criminal justice reform and access to courts and doing things better for young people and trying to figure out how do we really save our future, and that our democracy in many ways is dependent upon the capacity for them to be saved as well. So as we have those two races going on, it's important that we have a message that brings both together to say, yes, as we fight for those things that we talked about here, the ways in which the Supreme Court makes these decisions that are completely partisan, not rooted in the rule of law or in any kind of standard whatsoever. We also have to think about a Supreme Court that needs to provide leadership to our other courts to make sure it can provide leadership to our communities, to educate our judges so they know how to meet the challenges that judges at the district level, at a circuit court level are going to be facing. So whether there's, how do we make sure that they have the necessary resources to address the treatment needs in their communities? For as I travel the state, I hear about opiates and methamphetamines and rural communities being decimated by mental health and a lack of resources. And the same is true in urban communities as well. How do we make sure mental health is prioritized? How do we ensure that judges are given the insight and the knowledge to deal with race and class and gender discrimination, LGBTQ rights, and ensuring that what we do from the bench empowers our community rather than weakens it? I often tell my young people when I see them from the bench, I say that I'm not only your judge, but I'm also your reflection. Whatever you see in me is also possible because you're here, you're in my courtroom. And I'm ready to say to our state that in 175 years, we've never elected a person of color, but it's time for us to be able to say there is an opportunity for us not only to make sure that we go from a 3-4 conservative, but 4-3 majority, but there's also an opportunity to ensure that the reflection of our state represents the other 20% of our state that is trying to be represented and should be represented in the high court in which we have. And we need that image to make sure that our state is moving forward and not backwards. So I'll end where I stand. That as Dr. King said, so as long as I do not firmly and irrevocably possess the right to vote, I do not possess myself. It is time for us to give our state back to ourselves and give it back to the voters, give it back to the working people who work hard every day in Wisconsin to make sure that our values are protected. And I'll say this, that I wasn't born in Wisconsin, but I chose it. I chose it because the values deserve to be protected and they deserve to be respected. And I look forward to being able to bring this diverse coalition that I have to be able to make sure that we're on the ground, working hard every day, knocking on doors, reminding people to not stay home, but to get out and vote, because this is a moment that could change the democracy of our state. Thank you so much. And now this gives me the wonderful opportunity to open up Miss Kathy, who's going to come and be able to give us some further information about Grassroots. Come on, let's welcome Kathy to the stage.
Thank you, Judge. My name is Kathy Keene, and next on the program, we get to talk about how Grassroots North Shore has been very involved and is still looking forward to helping these great candidates become the next people of the Supreme Court. Grassroots North Shore has had to learn how to very quickly pivot after the 2020 election, and the pandemic created such havoc with how to really get the vote accomplished. We began in earnest to think of new ways to reach potential voters and to assist them in navigating the absentee ballot process and all the other voting procedures that we needed to overcome because of the pandemic. One strategy which we have implemented and is an extensive postcard writing program, and we're really good at this. Weeks before the election, we design and have ordered thousands of postcards with the help of the finances from the donors. Then we prepare the packets of cards, lists of addresses, the stamps that go with each packet. And then we've had drivers help deliver these packets to dozens of volunteers in the North Shore area, members of Grassroots, who then address these cards and have mailed them out. In the last few weeks, we just did another round of postcards, and over 6,000 postcards were sent out through the help of our volunteers. This primary race is super important. We have learned that follow-up phone calls and text messages to postcard recipients is another important tool. These contacts can also include important information about when early voting happens and remind people about signing their absentee ballots properly if they choose to vote that way. We've also had volunteers help distribute campaign signs all throughout the North Shore in previous elections. And some enthusiastic souls have even used their talents to stand at prominent places such as libraries and highly visible corners of local streets with big signs that would draw attention to don't forget that voting's coming up. We've also had people hand out flyers at libraries and other public places to remind people of the importance of voting. Other volunteers have been willing to drive or insist in teams of taking people into the neighborhoods for some door-to-door activities when that started to become possible again. We've designed flyers that we then distribute at homes and have done some door-to-door canvassing too in the last few election cycles. All of these individual actions need volunteers. Recently, we also have been reaching out to local college students, and we've had some really good success on local campuses, engaging younger potential voters and sometimes finding out they're not registered yet and encouraging them on the process of how to get involved. And we know the last election cycle, youth was a very helpful event procedure. All of these efforts are needed to reach each potential voter, and it's not too late for you to lend a hand in the next few weeks. You can go to Grassroots North Shore to sign up. Others have told me what I also have been feeling, that to volunteer with Grassroots North Shore is worth it, in part because we have such an effective planning and implementation team who are really willing to listen and be flexible and take on new assignments. We need to thank the volunteers who we have been relying on in these last two election cycles. And we also need to encourage a few more, even if you only have an afternoon to donate or you really are more active from your home. The phoning lists still need to be accomplished. We need everybody to reach out in these next 3 weeks. This election cannot go off the radar screen. We've just heard from great candidates. We've got to be sure that everybody turns out in what is often a low turnout primary. Then we'll see you help us bring this across the finish line. Now I have the pleasure of passing on the program to hear from a few words from our great governor, Tony Evers. Followed by that, we're going to get some thoughts from the candidate for the special election in the 8th Senate District, Jody Habish-Senekin, and then from Grassroots Committee member Mark, with Mark's membership minutes.
Hello folks, Governor Tony Evers here. I'm thrilled to join you today and thank you for the incredible work you are doing to make Milwaukee and our entire state better and stronger. You're a critical, progressive voice for the community, and the work that you're doing is really making a difference. In 2022, Grassroots North Shore volunteers completed thousands of hours of canvassing. You had important conversations with voters in places like Glendale, Bayside, Brown Deer, Fox Point, and beyond. Together, you helped deliver important victories for the state of Wisconsin, including my reelection. With your help, we won by 3.4%. That's a landslide, folks, and I know we couldn't have done this without you. But our work isn't finished. I'm counting on you to stand up with me as I work to deliver on the promises I made to voters over the past 2 years, whether it's stronger public schools, lower taxes for working families, or expanded access to reproductive health. We need strong organizers like you in the fight with us. And we have a tremendous opportunity this spring to elect a Wisconsin Supreme Court justice who believes that our basic rights should be protected, not taken away. I know each of you will be working hard on behalf of the progressive Supreme Court nominee this spring. And when we're successful in that race, I know Wisconsin's future will be even brighter. Thank you so much for your continued work. I'm looking forward to everything that we're going to accomplish together this year.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity to introduce myself to you today. Right off the bat, I'd like to start off by telling you why I'm running for Wisconsin State Senate and why now. The short and long answer are the same. It's because I feel compelled to. Like many of you, I am well aware that our future is quite literally hanging in the balance. Wisconsin is at a tipping point, and we need to flip this seat blue and to secure the Supreme Court justice that will allow us to correct our state's maps. Without this seat, we are at risk of the Republicans achieving a supermajority, which would prevent Governor Evers from being able to veto harmful bills. And I can tell you that as an attorney for over 30 years and a longtime environmental advocate and someone involved with political causes, I have been brutally aware of all the harmful bills that crossed his desk last year. And the thought of them coming back again this year and in coming years without his ability to veto them literally was what was the catalyst for me saying yes when I was asked if I would consider running. So here I am. I'm before you now as your candidate running for the Senate district seat. And I very much value your help and support as we move forward. I can tell you as an attorney that the proudest, most meaningful successes of my career have always been by working with many others from all diverse backgrounds and different stakeholders, different political parties to achieve long-term solutions to chronic issues of concern. I did this by helping to draft the implementing language for the Great Lakes Compact, which is a long-term regional agreement which Wisconsin joined to protect our precious Great Lakes and to come up with long-term solutions to protect against diversions and to conserve and sustain these incredibly important resources for our state and region. I did the same in helping to draft important language and to secure the enactment of Wisconsin's puppy mill bill that many of you might be aware of as well. It created a registration and inspection program for Wisconsin breeding businesses and enterprises, which before then were completely unregulated. And it was an enormously important step forward to protect against the inhumane conditions and consumers who were put at risk by bonding with very sick animals as well. And in both cases, and in many others in Grounding Groundwater and Clean Water Act cases, I was always very much able to work across the aisle and work with different stakeholders to try to work solutions forward. And as you well know, our legislature needs someone who can work together to deal with the dysfunction and the rancor that is affecting our legislature due to too much extremist elements. I am certainly no extremist, and I can tell you that my values perfectly align with those in the 8th district. I can tell you that I am pro-choice, pro-conservation, and pro-democracy. I believe Wisconsin needs to be a state that offers our children top-tier educational and economic opportunities, to be a state that can compete for the best jobs and the best minds. I am in favor of choice in schools, but not in favor of privatizing schools at the public expense. I champion efforts to address climate change and to protect our state's precious natural places and wildlife. I believe we need our communities to be safe. I believe that a strong, well-funded, and just law enforcement system is critical to ongoing public safety. Finally, I strongly believe in a woman's right to choose her own healthcare options, including the right to choose an abortion. I thank you again for this opportunity to speak before you today, and I look forward to meeting all of you in person sometime soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My name is Mark Ennis, and I co-chair the membership committee of Grassroots North Shore, along with Kath Michael. I'm going to try to summarize all we've heard and all we've seen tonight by using an analogy I'll call the Battle of the Bands. This contest will be held in 2 rounds where the winner gets to decide the future of our state. Our first band is on my very far right, which is your left, and is known as the Court Jesters. This group also goes by the name the Four Injustices. There's Annette Ziegler on the Swiss Alpine horn. There's Rebecca Walsh on the Vuvuzela. And Brian Hagedorn on the taiko drum. And soon to be retired, Patience Rogensock on the kazoo. The unique sound coming out of this group can only be described as cacophonic. The Four Injustices built their reputation by possessing no talent as well as lacking any logic, reason, or understanding of jurisprudence. And opposing the Court Jesters, on my left, is the group known as the Righteous Ones, with Jill Karofsky, Ann Walsh-Bradley, and Rebecca Dallett. But as a trio, they're under a great handicap and need that 4th member if they're ever going to break the domination of the Court Jesters. Fortunately, waiting in the wings, we have 2 great candidates in Everett Mitchell and Janet Protasiewicz. And how about a round of applause for Jody Sinekin, who's about to release her first album, The Senate 8th District. Fortunately, we all get to be judges in this contest, pardon the pun, and can determine the outcome of this battle. But it will take a supreme effort on all of our parts to ensure that the Righteous Ones become that critical quartet. Grassroots North Shore will help spearhead these efforts. So what can you do to help? If you're not a member of Grassroots North Shore, please join. It's only $30 a year for family, $20 for an individual, $5 for a student. And if you are a member, please renew. Just go online, grassrootsnorthshore.com. And as a member, you'll also be getting our great newsletter. And as this is a fundraiser, I would be remiss if I didn't also mention donations of any amount will be greatly appreciated and can also be done online. And while you're there, check out our website where you'll find the most complete, up-to-date information on any elections in this area. Unfortunately, we cannot handle non-fungible tokens like this idiot is trying to peddle. Now, Lady Justice is never going to smile if she has to listen to this all day. But if we can get her to listen to this instead, I think we can get Lady Justice to smile again. And that is our current task. Thank you. Now here is Cheryl Moranto, our co-chair, for some final words.
Hi, this is Cheryl Moranto. I am the co-chair of Grassroots North Shore. Thank you, Mark. Every day, I am reminded of the truly perilous times that we find ourselves living in. The bad news, we have all come to the realization that we cannot take our freedoms for granted. The freedom to vote and to have our vote count. The freedom to decide if and when to have a family, and the right to the full range of reproductive health care. The right to clean air and water. And the right of voters to choose our representatives instead of the politicians choosing their voters. The good news, Grassroots North Shore is here to summon and coordinate our collective efforts so that each of us can do our part to save our democracy, to give us agency. I would like to sincerely thank each and every one of you for joining us this evening. For those of you who have already renewed your membership and contributed, thank you. To those who have not yet contributed to support our voter education and mobilization efforts, I urge you to go to grassrootsnorthshore.com and donate now to support our work. We really need volunteers to get out the vote in these low turnout and low information elections on February 21st and April 4th. We are making follow-up phone calls to strong Democrats and coordinating canvasses with the Democratic Party right now. Please sign up. Information on all of our volunteer opportunities will be in our weekly newsletter and are on our website. We ask that you push outside of your comfort zone and do all that you can to help ensure that our voters know about these elections and what is at stake, as all of our speakers tonight have made so clear. If we flip the Supreme Court seat, we can fix our gerrymandered maps in 2024, and we can save abortion rights and protect women's lives in Wisconsin. Finally, we have another great program on tap on March 12th in conjunction with our annual meeting. This will be in person at the North Shore Presbyterian Church in Shorewood. It will feature the progressive Supreme Court candidate who wins the primary and is on the April ballot, as well as Jody Habush-Sinekin, who will flip the 8th Senate District blue in April with our help. Come and be inspired to take action so that we can win these crucial April elections. Thanks to Nick Stephanopoulos for sharing his deep expertise with us, for Judges Mitchell and Protasewicz for joining us, and Ann Ingham for her technical assistance. And thanks once again to all of you tonight for attending and for your commitment to ensure that our children and our grandchildren will enjoy the same freedoms and opportunities that we have had. Good night.